Hello, my name is Anthony, and I am going to teach you about what it means to be an effective student. At least what's helped me become an effective student. Okay, so the gist of this video is I'm going to give you the 3 biggest tips I have as a student and how to be an effective one. Yeah, take them with a grain of salt. They work for me, might not work for you, but they could. So I'm offering them. So tip number 1, at least in my mind for being a good student, have a disciplined schedule. Set aside time to do everything that you need to do as a student. Time for lectures, studying for exams, doing homework, going to office hours and asking questions. We all have our daily routines. We all have different schedules. The key is just finding your groove. Find what times work in the day, even if it's half an hour to 40 minutes. When can you go ask questions, or when can you sit down and do homework or read the book? Whatever it is you are comfortable doing with while studying, you need to have a time block to do it. Because if you don't, at least in my experience, if I don't, I get caught up with other obligations, going to work, family time, anything. The less time blocks that you set aside for being a student, the less likely you are to actually get time to be a student, because life happens. So that's my tip number 1. Set aside time to actually be a student. Okay, so tip number 2 for being a better student, have good habits. That goes with learning, being in class, taking notes, taking exams. So for example, a pretty bad habit I had for a long time as a student, when you take exams, a lot of times people start on the first problem where they don't fully read the exam before actually starting. A lot of times that's because you have the time pressure. But here's what I do, at least what I do now. And it was a hard habit to break. But what I do now, instead of just starting on the first problem like I always had, flip through the exam first if you can, or look through the questions. Look for a question that you recognize instantly, that you feel comfortable with instantly. And you want to do that because in my experience, when I've done that and you start off on a problem that you are comfortable with and that you feel much better throughout the rest of the exam. Things just flow better. Part of it is stress. The more stressed you are while taking an exam, and you might get stressed because you started at a problem that was hard for you or that you didn't recognize easily. But once you're in that stress mode, all of a sudden you start missing things you normally wouldn't have missed. You start overthinking problems, or you miss small minor details. And it's because, in my experience, when I started off on the wrong foot with an exam, I felt like I was playing catch up and that I was starting from behind. And technically that's not true, because with exams, you start at 0. So no matter what, you start at 0. You don't lose points instantly. Even if you do bad on the first question you try, you at least probably got some points out of it or something out of it. But in the heat of the moment, you're not thinking that, because all you're thinking is, dang, I did really bad on the first question I tried, and now I'm stuck with this grade. I need to do this, this, and that to pick it back up. So yeah, start with something you're comfortable with. Put yourself ahead in the beginning mentally so you don't feel like you're playing catch up the whole way. And it'll just be much less stressful taking exams. So yeah, that is tip number 2. Better learning habits. And the testing is just an example of one of my learning habits. Okay, so tip number 3 that I have is going to sound a little counterintuitive, and it's going to not make that much sense to you, but it makes sense to me. And the alarm bells might go off in your head when I say this, but stop caring so much about your grades and exam outcomes. And please don't take that as throw caution to the wind and just don't study. Continue studying, but what I mean is try to remove all the academic pressure you can from learning. It's not easy, and it happens to me sometimes too, where I'll freak out during an exam or something big and realize it's worth a lot of points. The problem with freaking out about that stuff is that when you're worried so much about the outcome of the exam, you don't worry enough about doing the things you have to do to actually get a good grade. What I mean by that is you spend all your time worrying about grades while you're taking the exam, while you're doing homework, and you don't worry about how can I actually learn the material so I can do better on the homework or do better on the exam, or let's say you are taking a final and you're super worried about the outcome of it, all of a sudden you get stressed and you start worrying about whether or not you have the right answer and whether or not you're actually doing the right steps to get the right answer. That's the point. So please try to remove academic pressure as much as possible. I know that stuff matters for GPAs, scholarships, scholarship programs, or even grad school. And yeah, it matters, but don't make it out to be bigger than it actually is. You might not even realize that every moment you spend worrying about your GPA or your grades is a moment you're not spending digesting class material and getting better with it so you can actually get better grades. So yeah, try to limit that as much as possible. It's not easy, and it's way easier said than done. But if you do figure out how to do it, it'll help you. It's helped me. So yeah, just try to stress less about the GPA. Won't be easy, but you got to do it. Okay, so to kind of put a cap on everything I've said so far, take what I said with a grain of salt. I've only been a UC student for 6 weeks. I've been a CC student for over 3 years, or was a CC student for 3 years. But I can tell you this, the 3 best things I think you can do as a student are, 1, just set up a disciplined schedule for yourself to have time to do everything. Go to lecture, do homework, ask questions in office hours, talk to your peers, teach someone else, stuff like that. Set aside the time to be a student, basically. The second one I can give you is create good learning habits. So take some time to reflect on everything you do as a student, how you take tests and exams, how you take notes, even how you ask questions. Like, for example, earlier I gave the example of when you're taking notes, don't write down every single thing possible. Take notes of the stuff that matters the most. Try to spend more time actually paying attention to the lecture and understanding rather than copying everything. And then I also gave the example of test taking. When you take a test, instead of starting on question 1, if you don't have to, look for the question that you'd be most comfortable answering with. And answer that first. So you give yourself, the mindset of like, I'm starting off on the right foot while taking the exam. You'll feel much better, you'll feel much less stressed, and you won't be playing catch up the whole exam. And then the third tip I gave was more of a conceptual one and not something to put in practice. But don't stress so much about your grades. Obviously they matter for important stuff, but the more time you spend worrying about what your GPA is or what your next exam score is going to be, that's time you're not spending thinking about the actual class material. And the irony of that is, the more you worry about understanding the material and internalizing it and having the knowledge in your head, the more likely you are to actually perform better academically versus just spending all your time worrying about the grade. You spend more time worrying about the material, you get better grades. At least that's what I've noticed. And so yeah, that's my 3 biggest things about being an effective student. Take them with a grain of salt. I am not by no means any sort of genius, but as someone that's done 3 years and a couple months of college, I can tell you these are the things that at least made my life a little less stressful. And to be honest, eliminating stress from the game is half the battle. You do that and you're definitely more likely to at least do better as a student. Anyways, that's my 2 cents on what it is to be an effective student. Hope you actually got something out of it, and good luck.